For 40 days on God, Family, and Guns, we'll be focused on God. We have a series on spiritual warfare, the end of times, the prophecy of Daniel, and the prophecy of Malachi. If you want to see our gun-related or Second Amendment-related content, you can see that on Patreon or the History of Weapons. Those links are below. Welcome to a series that we call Spiritual Warfare, where we're going through the book of Joshua verse by verse to get a great understanding of when you're within the will of God and you're on His path and you do not turn from the left or the right, how you can have victory every single time. But that is much more difficult. It is way more easier said than done. This is a very difficult thing to suggest. So where we are in this book, because we want to get a great understanding, is as we've hit it verse by verse, we're at a point in Joshua where they have not crossed the river, the Jordan River. In last episode, we talked about specifically the Reubenites, the Gadites, and the tribe of Manasseh, who were wanting to stay on that side of the Jordan River, and the agreements they made with Moses prior, and kind of where they stood with Joshua at this point. We talked about how whenever, even though somebody might have another agenda at the end, as long as they're on God's path, it's still going to work. It's just whether the outcome is different, because the outcome is often different for different people, but they could still be on the same path, which is the case with Joshua, all the tribes of Israel, and then these tribes as well. They all have the same plan. They're all on the same path, but they have different end results, and that's okay. But there's something that these three tribes, the leaders of these three tribes, say to Joshua that's very peculiar that we're going to talk about specifically today. And we're going to start in verse 16, chapter 1. And they answered Joshua, saying, "All that you command us, we will do. And wherever you send us, we will go. Just as we heeded Moses in all things, so we will heed you. Only the Lord your God be with you, as he was with Moses. Whoever rebels against your command and does not heed your words in all that you command him shall be put to death. Only be strong and of good courage." Now, I want to take a moment and just talk about this response that they gave to Joshua, which is essentially, we're going to do everything you asked us to do, just like we did with Moses. We're going to go everywhere you tell us to go. We're going to do everything you tell us to do. And whoever does not do that, they should die. This is some serious unity. And I just want to talk about that for a moment, because the nation of Israel, from the man Israel, Jacob himself, when his name was changed to Israel, his 12 sons, there has never been unity in that family or in his descendants. Never. Jacob himself, his whole life was filled with deception of his brother. And then he had 12 sons. And they sold one of them, Joseph, into slavery in Egypt. And that's what ultimately led them all to Egypt. There's never been this agreement. And then when Moses shows up to free them, there's just confusion and conflict. And everything we read about from the wandering through the desert and making it to the is just conflict and confusion, total disagreement, total anarchy, complete disregard of God's will in their life by most Israelites. And for the very first time in the history of Israel, they're all on board. What did it take? Did it really take to cause 40 years of that whole generation to just drop dead in the wilderness for this new generation to rise up and be united as the remnant of Jesus Christ to then go and war in this promised land? And I believe the answer is yes. It does require oftentimes a generation just to die away and another generation to rise up and do the things that God is asking them to do. Not just do them, but doing them with courage and strength. And that's exactly what keeps on being repeated to Joshua. Be strong and of good courage. And we talked about what God said about that. Earlier in this chapter, be strong and of good courage, meaning I am with you. There's nothing you need to fear. Be strong and of good courage, but stay within the law of Moses. Be strong and of good courage, knowing that I go before you. You know, and now they're saying be strong and have good courage, because we're so incredibly united that if anybody questions a single thing you say, Joshua, he should be put to death. And what we're going to find out when they do cross the Jordan River, when anybody strays away from what Joshua's orders are or his plans, or when Joshua strays away from it, it only causes problems. It's hard to stay within the will of God, and it's even harder when the people that you have surrounded yourselves with are causing anarchy and chaos, and they're not within the will of God. And that's the problem that we have within the church today. Is there's, you know, I've said it many times, if you're in a town of 10,000 people, there may be one or two of you that are like Joshua. The rest just seem to be in a fog. They have no idea what they're doing. They're showing up for the Sunday show. They're worshiping false idols. They're not taking care of their neighbors. They're causing all sorts of problems, but hey, they show up to the Sunday show. And what we see in Joshua is that in order to have victory, you have to be united. And because of this lack of unity, God caused everybody that was below the age of 20 to live out, and everybody above the age of 20 to drop dead in the wilderness. And once everybody that was above the age of 20, other than Joshua and Caleb, had dropped dead and their carcasses were rotten in the wilderness, all of a sudden now we see this new generation that is standing up for the things of God as a united front. And if you're surrounding yourself with people that are not united, you have to separate yourself from them. Otherwise, you and them are going to have to wander around the wilderness until a generation has passed away, and a new generation that is willing to do it will rise up and do it. Because as we enter into the end times, this is absolutely what God is calling the remnant to do, is to unite and be one solid front. It is unity that gave Joshua strength, because Joshua wanted to conquer this land 40 years earlier, but it didn't matter because he didn't have people behind him. Now he does. That other generation had to die and rot in the wilderness, and now we have this new generation. I believe that's what the church is going to have to go through for this new generation, is they're just going to have to die off and rot away, and a new generation rises up as the remnant to stand up for the things of God. So hope these videos are helping. Stick with us. We're just getting started. Again, I've personally learned a lot about spiritual warfare since I started this series, and I ain't even gone across the river and started war yet. So it's a beautiful thing to see. Stick with us. If you have any comments or thoughts, put it below. If you like this video, click like and subscribe. If you feel called to support this channel through Patreon, that link is also below. But the most important part of this channel, we take prayer requests. So please don't ever hesitate to send that in. Thank you for watching this episode of God, Family, and Guns. And as always, love God, love your family, and love guns.